Don't be surprised if you're on YouTube later and you're not knowing why. You're good to go.
Okay, so I'd like to call the District of Port Hardy regular council meeting on Tuesday, January 24th to order. Respectfully acknowledging that this meeting is being held on the traditional territory of the Kaurna people of Giligessa. So, for our agenda, I'd like to add 3 items to it. So to do that, we would have to have majority vote for the agenda to be amended. So, we have a motion to amend the agenda.
Do we know what we're amending?
Oh, yes. It would be under business arising, the bequeath of the, Stories Beach, park and the changes there. Arise and report on the Seagate Park. And so that would be under business arising. And then under staff reports, we would, I'd like to add the chief election officer report.
I'll make that motion to amend the agenda.
I'll second it.
Thank you. So Counselor Smith moved, Counselor Dugas, seconded. Approval of the agenda as presented or as amended. All in favor? Opposed? Thank you. Minutes of the special council meeting held January 9th for adoption. Moved by Counselor Robertson, seconded by Counselor Smith. Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Minutes of the Policy and Governance Committee meeting held January 10th for adoption. Moved by Counselor Tidbury, seconded by Counselor Dorwood. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting held January 10th for adoption. Moved by Counselor Smith, seconded by Counselor Tidbury. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. Minutes of the regular council meeting held January 10th for adoption. Moved Counselor Tidbury, second Counselor Texmo. Any discussion? All in favor? Carried. So we have delegations tonight, so thank you for coming. So Nikki Ranger, Executive Director, North Island Crisis and Counseling, update to the council. What is speaking? Thanks, you're welcome to our table.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for having me. As Mayor Corbett Labatt said, my name is Nikki Ranger and I'm the Executive Director of the North Island Crisis and Counseling Center and have been there for about a year now. One of the reasons I wanted to come was to give you an update on all of the work that we're doing in the community. One of the criticisms or one of the feedback that we get is that most people don't know what we do or how many things we do and are often surprised at all of the things we do in the community. So I just wanted to bring you an update on all that we do. So to sort of start us off, we've been in operation since 1982. We currently have 52 employees that are delivering service across 21 different programs in all of the communities in the North Island. So we're based in Port Hardy, but we do provide outreach to Zabalas and the islands and provide service in Port McNeill and all of the surrounding communities. What I'd like to do is just sort of give you a rundown on the programs that we provide. In a nutshell, I won't go into all the details. Most people know that we provide counseling services. We do have a full complement of counselors. We have a family counselor, a sexual abuse counselor, a child and youth mental health counselor. I had to bring notes so I didn't leave anyone out. A Stopping the Violence women's counselor, a Foundry counselor, which I know that you guys are well familiar with our Foundry project, as well as a children who witness abuse counselor, now known as a peace counselor. So we have a full complement of counseling. Most of our counselors have wait lists, as do most people in the community, but we just received additional funding to provide a men's counselor. So we're just in the process of hiring for that, which is a new program to the community. We also have a women's outreach worker who provides outreach to women who have multiple barriers in the community, like food insecurity or housing. We operate the Greenhouse, or affectionately known as the Greenhouse, the New Beginnings program, which is an 11-bed social detox crisis stabilization program for adults with substance use and mental health issues. That's a 24-hour, 365-day-a-week residential program. So we have 10 staff that work down there. We operate police-based victim services in both detachments. We operate the domestic violence safe shelter. So that's for women who are fleeing domestic violence, women and their children. So that facility, it's a confidential location in Port Hardy, but it can have capacity for 2 families separate, like at the same time. So women and multiple children. We operate infant development, which is early intervention program for 0 to 6, supported child development, which provides in daycare support for children who may need some additional one-on-one support. An early years navigator to help parents with young children, Better at Home program, who's non-medical intervention for seniors who are living independently. We operate Let's Play Daycare, which is a 12-space infant toddler center behind the high school. A lot of things. Family support, which is an inclusive after-school program for children, youth with special needs. Youth outreach for high-risk youth in the community who need a little bit of additional support. FASD key worker program, so we provide education around people living with fetal alcohol syndrome. Strong Start, which is the early learning program with the school district. Hospice and grief support, which is trained volunteers to provide support for families experiencing end of life. And then, of course, we have our Foundry project, which is underway and literally under construction. Thank goodness. So I keep saying when the open date, as people don't hold me to it, thankfully, but we do have construction targeted right now to be completed in April. So yeah, although I said last June, here we are. There's a couple of other things that we do that we don't sort of officially do, but we do off the side of our desk. You may have heard that we brought third-party reporting to the community. So that's it's not something we're funded for, but it's something that our staff felt passionately about. And that's about allowing victims of sexual assault to report their crime to the police through a third party, being our trained staff. And so that allows people to get their report to the police without having to identify who they are. And so that's new to the community. We also are active members of the NYSERN committee, the North Island Critical Incident Response Network. Our counselors provide support to that for any community critical incidents. As well as we have an elder in residence who's just come on board around providing culturally sensitive support to our clients as well as our staff. So lots and lots of things. And like I said, most people know of those programs, but don't realize that the Crisis Center is where we're based out of. We have 6 work sites, working on number 7.
Thank you, Nikki. One thing you didn't mention that happened
I
when
usually forget
you
something.
started.
Yeah.
The accreditation.
Oh, yes. The staff worked diligently. We are an accredited agency with the Council on Accreditation and have been for a number of years. However, we are required to renew that every 3 years. Just this past year, the staff worked really diligently around renewing our accreditation, and we renewed in October with a perfect rating. So we didn't have anything that we needed to address, and we were reaccredited for 4 years. So that was a real feather in the staff and the board's cap around, making sure that our programs and our staff are adhering to the highest possible standards for service in our community.
Well, congratulations.
Yes.
So it's only 3 years, and then because you did so well, it's 4 years?
Apparently, we're through to 2026 now. So
Well done.
yeah.
Well done on bringing that up.
Yes, thank you. I usually forget something, which is why I had to bring notes.
Thanks, Nikki, and I have the privilege of having an office, the MLA's office, right next door to, actually one before it was built before,
Yes.
it's now the other program.
Yeah.
But thank you for everything you do. I know it's quite dispersed, but I'm gonna ask you an unfair question.
Okay.
So if you had a major ask at this point, and something that we could support you in a major ask, what would it be? Like in 10 seconds or so. So like, it's not fair because it's one of those things you have a little bit thinking, you have to sort of think about.
Yeah, and I appreciate the question. I think certainly council support with our Foundry project has been really, really helpful and has really helped move that along. So that certainly for that to continue would be helpful. The other thing I think that we are really have our eye on is around bringing community-based victim services to the community. So currently we operate police-based victim services, but that provides victim services only to people who have an open police report.
Mhm.
So if someone doesn't want to report to the police, or the police report closes, or court is not going to pick that police file up and prosecute, then technically victim services then closes. So our victim service workers continue to provide service, but really that's not within their mandate.
Mhm.
If we brought community-based victim services here, that would allow people in our community who are victims of crime to receive victim services and support regardless of whether they went to the police or not. So that's something that we're trying to bring to the community, and council support in that, whether that's just providing a letter to say that, you support what we do would be really helpful. That's certainly something that we see as a gap that we're actively working towards bringing here.
Thanks again. I apologize.
That's okay.
So giving letters of support, it's often what, as a council, we do. So if you gave a formal request,
Yeah,
Mhm.
that would be great. Thank you.
any other questions? Not this way.
No question, but thank you so much for all that you and your team provide for the community. And yes, anything we can do to help support our vulnerable, people in the community. Thank you for filling that gap for them. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
And yeah, myself, I just thank you. I didn't know a lot of those programs. Actually, I hadn't even heard of some of them, so really appreciate the update and come back again.
It's funny because I've worked in the community for a number of years in a different capacity, and when I took over the role, I didn't know all of the things that the president did. So I think, to be fair, I think it's, I'm always really happy to brag about the work that the staff and the board do, and happy to come and do updates anytime. So it certainly was just my intention to fill you in on all the good work we're doing.
You still have the better at home?
We do, yeah, I said better at home.
Okay.
Yep,
52 employees, that's awesome.
52 employees.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Any other questions, comments? So thank you very much for coming. I think kudos for having all the counselors. I know that's
Yes.
been a big issue over the years, is having the full complement of counselors. So kudos as well for being able to do that.
Yeah. And one of the things that the counselors, sort of when they all came on board, they really identified the need for a men's counselor, and so really actively sought funding, and were supported through Island Health to bring that program here. So
Mhm.
really excited to get that off the ground.
Congratulations.
Mhm.
That's great. Thank you very much. And you know how to get a hold of me.
I do. I did bring some Foundry goodies if anybody is interested. I don't know if you already have some.
But
Swag.
I do. Their books are nice.
I brought them.
Oh.
I brought my little picnic basket. So I brought, I think this I brought.
Oh, I have one.
Okay, and I also brought let's masks.
Oh,
Hold on, and all that stuff.
and lanyards.
No bribes, because I didn't come asking for anything.
Later.
Yeah, accepting gifts here.
And we have lots of, and for anybody in the room, we have lots and lots of swag that we're happy to share with people, so. Anybody-
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Nikki. And like
Thanks,
you
Nikki.
said, you're welcome to stay, but we're not offended if it's.
Welcome. Thank you.
We will be, we just, it's privately.
Not as bad.
So we also have another delegate, Brian Kingset. Thank you, Executive Director, BC Salmon Farmers Association. So welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Seeing as I get the opportunity to sit, I think I'll use my laptop as notes, and then Heather can see what's on my screen and move,
Ooh, perfect.
change. Yeah. Watch the battery die or something at the same time.
No
So-
pessimism.
So I'm here as representative of the BC Salmon Farmers. In the past, we've enjoyed very good relations with this council and Mayor Dennis. And our previous, I guess, what we call now, past Mayor Dennis Dugas. And so with the new council, new mayor, congratulations. I wanted to come up, we wanted to represent the association and our members and give you guys a bit of an update on what's happening in the sector. And just be informational, make sure that we touch base and so that, and let you know that we're here, you know, whenever you have any questions or we can provide. Area that's having significant ramifications on Port McNeill and Port Hardy, and I'll explain a little bit why. And then I want to talk about this document that's in front of you and the Department of Fisheries and Oceans Open Net Pen transition process, and provide a little bit of information on that and a little bit of what's happening and not happening and where we stand on it, because the process is even still confusing to the sector. So I can't imagine what it's like for people who are on the margins. So just, we remain, and I think many of you in this community know how important the industry is on the North Island, but we remain as the #1 agricultural export in BC, providing about $1.2 billion to the BC economy. That's actually down about $400 million from where we were pre-Discovery Islands decision. We're very focused on working with our Indigenous partners and the Indigenous communities we work in, embracing UNDRIP. And reconciliation is I'm very proud of, you know, I think I heard from one of the agriculture groups on the Lower Mainland that, you know, we're far and away of any ag sector in trying to embrace reconciliation. It's a long road and sometimes a bumpy road, but we're working very hard at it. We have about 70 members, including a lot of service suppliers in the North Island here. And right now we're responsible for about 4,700 jobs that are essentially perhaps on the line right now. We receive a lot of environmental certifications. And just in the last, up until 22, we put about $500 million in the sector into new innovation and technology and skills development. And you'll see that, you know, the Moe's vessels, the Roy Christian and the Aqua Chamoy on your dock, and some of the amazing things that are sort of happening in the sector here. We're also, it's always important to remind, as you're all aware, we remain a fairly polarized sector with a lot of opposition to the sector, but our sustainability is supported by science. Since the Cohen Commission into the demise of Fraser River salmon, that was really a trial of the salmon farming industry. Subsequent to that, there's been 9 major peer-reviewed scientific risk assessments on various things, and those have all determined that we pose a minimal risk to, in that case, to Fraser River salmon, but salmon at large. And just on Friday, a 10th science advice report came out. So these are federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans led, but they bring in Canada's best scientists and in many cases international scientists as well to conduct these peer reviews. And the Friday report basically said that sea lice, which everybody has heard about and in the protests and everything else, that actually there's no statistical correlation between the numbers of sea lice in the pens on the farms and what is observed in wild salmon. And that has been the issue that we have been dealing with for a long time. That is probably a lot to do with the management that the companies are doing. Companies work very hard to maintain their low sea lice levels so that we don't reinfect wild populations. But we're very pleased to see that, and we hope that that will add to the scientific debate. The other thing that I think is really important right now, because our issues are federal, is how we align with the current federal government's major initiatives. And those are reconciliation, food security. We're seeing a lot more food insecurity and food pricing issues in Canada. Climate adaptation. Climate adaptation is going to continue to be a major issue for us. I just spoke earlier about the amount of innovation that we're doing. Canada, and when I say Canada, I mean the federal government, is really pushing this idea of a blue economy in Canada, a coastal-based economy drawing on our ocean sectors. We're very proud to be a very large part of that. As you know, we provide very significant socioeconomic benefits the communities that we operate in. And also, and I think this gets forgotten sometimes in debate, every salmon farmer I know started as a fish geek. I'm a marine biologist by training. We all share that concern for wild salmon. And so we're working very hard to do that and make sure that the veterinarians and the scientists and the biologists in the sector, help continue to work to make sure that we do not impact wild salmon. We'll take questions, and I know you guys are conscious of time, so I'm trying to move fairly quickly. So in 2020, as you are probably aware, the then fisheries minister, and we've had 5 fisheries ministers basically in the last, I think, 6 years, came out with a decision that would not renew licenses, 19 licenses in the Discovery Islands, the area of the Lakwatoo territories, to the east of Campbell River. The industry was given 15 minutes notice. We believed that we had all the science on our side, and the industry and local communities were not consulted, and to a certain extent, the Lakwatoo nations weren't consulted either. If you're not familiar, the area in red is with the 19 sites that were essentially closed down over the last 2 years. And that has had significant economic impacts to the industry. About 24% of the industry closed down. When we talk about food insecurity, that's equates to 20,000 metric tons of whole weight salmon, or about 120 million meals a year that now has been taken out. I won't go into the broader impacts on the industry, but I will specify the impacts that we know that we're having in Port Hardy and Port McNeill. We commissioned an economic analysis after that happened, which is available on our website, and I can supply if anybody's interested. But basically, in Port Hardy, Port McNeill, we identified 62 secondary suppliers of goods and services to the sector. We now estimate that there's probably about $5.4 million less in spending across those businesses. Probably the most significant reduction here in Port Hardy is this is the year that everything's, because of the way salmon farming production cycles and how they draw from different areas. This was the year that Port Hardy would be mostly processing Discovery Islands fish. Mm-hmm. So this year, that instead of processing 248 days, that the Port Hardy processing plant is only going to process 112 days. They simply don't have the fish to process. And that's going to have very big labor impacts, not layoffs, but certainly reduced work for those union jobs. And remember that salmon farming jobs average about $79,000 a year. And pay over scale, and we have a very young workforce. So we were very proud of the fact that we've been attracting younger people up to the North Island. MOE is informed me this week that this year they expect, as a result of this, to lose 9 full-time employees, 7 from the processing side and 2 on the maintenance team, and they're working very hard to keep the employees going, even though there's going to be this reduction in processing days. So that's also having very negative impacts on Guasala and Nakwada and other First Nation partner businesses. As you guys will know and probably attended the GNN big event, they've invested very heavily, for example, in a tug and feed barge, and that feed barge is now, this is rippling out through the entire industry. So, we're all feeling very, very badly about, the impacts it's having on our employees. So, last April in 2022, the companies that were affected applied for federal judicial review, and that came in a very strong rebuke to what the previous fisheries minister did, that she had breached the rights of the companies, had not given procedural fairness, she had not properly consulted with First Nations. In fact, even when they went back through the records, internal records, the reason for which the Discovery Islands decision was made actually changed several times in the couple days prior to it. And so basically what you read from that was it was a completely political decision being driven out of urban areas. She'd also not, the companies that had about 10 million, as I had in a prior slide, had to kill and euthanize about 10 million fish worth about $170 million. They had, and one of the reasons they had kept growing those fish is that they had applied for an injunction, which they received to allow them to continue restocking fish, and the minister had not observed that other federal injunction. So that still hangs over our head. The companies have the ability to apply for damages, and they have not yet. They are waiting to stay, you know, they've been trying to to put it bluntly, play nice with the federal government and try and work to get some of these sites restored. We expect in the next 2 weeks that the current Fisheries Minister, Minister Joyce Murray, is going to come down with a decision about the renewal of those licenses in the Discovery Islands. The Lakwato Nations, this is Wewakai, Wewakum, Campbell River, and the Klahoust First Nation, between them have submitted proposals, and this is very important because the nations were not properly consulted, and I'm going to talk briefly about the broader transition process. And the way they feel is that their rights and title have not been met, and they have not even been given the chance to talk, you know, have them, as Chief Roberts in Campbell River put it, and we would come, that they were not given the chance to say maybe about the future of the industry, and I'll talk about that in transition. So they have submitted a proposal that they came up with, and the companies have agreed to, that would see 8 farms replaced out of the 19, so 60% reduction coming into the Discovery Islands, bringing back 1 or 2 at a time, and they would be under strong Indigenous governance and oversight, and using them to test new technologies. So the companies and the nations feel they have offered up an extremely responsible proposal to the federal government. And they're working actually very hard to keep those, because they lost a lot of jobs and a lot of processing opportunity they were hoping for as well. So that brings me to what is termed the DFO transition, which is a very confusing process right now. And this originated in 2019 when the federal government put in an election platform that by 2025 they would move all salmon farms out of the water. And at the time that was to close the position to close containment, and what that would essentially mean is that Vancouver Island would lose salmon, by and large, lose most of the salmon farming industry, because when we move onto land, which is even now still questionably feasible from an economic point of view, we simply don't have the land or the power grid on Vancouver Island to support that. Plus, we know that the sector would, in order to make the economics work, move to urban areas where they're closer to the market. Last year, that transition was changed to a transition from open net pen salmon farming. We still don't know what we're moving to, but the keywords are something that eliminates or reduces interactions between salmon open net pens and wild salmon. So we're still working with the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to find out what that is. We're in a consultation process right now. We're in what is just coming out of what is called their phase 2 of 4 of them, where we are now in a series of workshops, and we've submitted, all the companies are submitting transition plans. First Nations are submitting transition plans for the First Nations that are engaged in the industry. But DFO is consulting with communities of interest, and I think there has been a few municipal meetings. Yeah. And so they've divided those communities of interest into the sector, local governments, First Nations that support the industry, First Nations that don't support the industry, and ENGOs. And there's some activist groups that are working very hard to still working on the premise that the mandate is to get us out of the water. So we expect, we are submitting, I guess Monday, we are submitting our next DFO consultation. Everything's due at the end of the month, and then in February, we will see a what was heard report. And then by the end of June this year, it is expected that the federal government is going to come out with a plan or what they call a framework for how we will move to this new state that we are still, to be honest, not sure what we are in. And we're, as a sector, trying to determine from DFO some definition around what the goalposts will be, what outcomes they want to see, because reduce and eliminate is still a very vague principle. The industry is committed to meeting whatever that bar is. We believe that we've demonstrated over the last couple of decades that we have been progressively innovating and reducing our impacts on the ecosystem. And we think that we can continue to do that, but the industry needs certainty. And so that brings us to this document that you have in front of us. And I'll just hit the high points is, looking at how we have changed. And some of you have maybe been around the industry since the early days. We're nothing at all like the industry was before. And we have a transition. And one of the things that we really want to do embrace in our vision of what we see the transition, so we sort of put that marker down, is that we want to see, we've been working very hard on reconciliation in the communities that we work on, is we actually want to see a First Nations-led BC salmon farming sector where we are recognizing rights and title. We're practicing reconciliation and getting equity for our First Nation partners, and that we're taking direction from them and making sure that that is consistent and taking that holistic ecosystem approach. We know that we have the ability to bring in new technologies, and we are looking at globally at new technologies that are around, but we need that business certainty. So the managing directors of the companies here, Mowi, Cermaq, and Grieg Seafoods that operate in the North Island, they all have to make a case to their head offices in Norway and Japan that there is business certainty to invest hundreds of millions of dollars back into Vancouver Island, and that there is a business case for that. If we can do that, we think we can be a major part of the Canada's blue economy. And so we've put out a number of foundational principles that we have requested the federal government take into account, and that is First Nations right to self-determination, practicing reconciliation, looking at tripart governance between First Nations, federal, and the province, and bringing First Nations in so their voice is recognized at that level. We need to create a sustainable sector growth. We have some NGOs that have said publicly that they don't actually need to have the federal government take the industry out. They just need to make it difficult, so difficult that the companies no longer have a business case to operate in coastal BC. So we have to be very careful about how that happens. As I mentioned, how we align with Canada and what Canada's principles are, we're trying to get recognition of that and to have that taken into account. And we also want to make sure that we have both a transition that develops social license and trust in the communities so that we can dampen down the arguments that are around the industry, and we can prove ourselves in our social license. So that's sort of where we are. That's our update. It's going to be an interesting year for the sector. It's going to be, unfortunately, I'm afraid to say it's going to be an interesting year for the Port Hardy, Port McNeill areas with the impacts that we're already feeling. So we're doing our very best to try and make sure that we hold the industry, and we have a number of First Nation partners that are hoping that actually we'll be able to get back to the point at which we start to rebuild the industry. So thank you very much for your time, and I'll take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Brian. Councilor Campbell?
I think it's a great presentation, very informative. One of my biggest questions would be just in the day and age of social media, there's no doubt that the social media wars of misinformation contributes to almost the entirety of your guys' problems. Yes. What are you guys doing to combat that side of things? I know that's a tough question.
That's a very good question, because I think our role has been to try and take the high road.
Right.
We're trying to take the high road at all times. We're trying not to engage. I just blocked another troll an hour ago. We're trying to get information out. I think it's not somewhere where we can win on social media, because we're trying to take the high road and be ethical and make sure everything we say is supported by science. And as you're probably aware of lots of other issues, especially around natural resource sector in British Columbia, is that a lot of the people who don't like the industry don't have any sideboards on what they can say. And we spend a lot of time actually trying to correct things that come out of the mainstream media, you know, and trying to correct them and respond to them. And that's kind of the approach we're taking. And then trying to, we issued a press release today about the sea lice report. And we noticed that not a single ENGO has picked it up.
Right.
Right. So that's a good example. So it doesn't fit with the narrative.
Yeah.
Councilor Dukas.
Yeah, just, Brian, just a question with regards to, and I'm sure not everybody's familiar with this, but there is a difference between the federal government and how they look at the aquaculture industries, fish farms specifically, compared to the East Coast and West Coast.
Yes.
They look at it differently. Could you just explain that?
Absolutely. So right now in Canada, even though these are all federal regulations, the transition is only directed at the Pacific Coast, and it's about the ministers or the people that are in the ministers' ear concerned specific wild salmon. In Eastern Canada, the industry is the provinces and the federal government are working very hard to build the industry in Eastern Canada. Same technology, same species. What is actually where we're actually getting most of our federal support from federal MPs right now is that the companies that are investing in Canada right now look at Canada as one investment market. So if the industry is chased off Vancouver Island, those companies are going to have indicated that they will pull the support for all their investment in Canada. They don't think about it as Eastern Newfoundland versus British Columbia. They look at it as investing in the country. And so that is probably one of the things that's helping us the most right now, to be absolutely honest, is that because we have such strong federal support by members of Parliament in Eastern Canada. So. And unfortunately, that is lacking in our MPs on Vancouver Island.
Thanks.
Councilor Robertson.
Yeah, thanks for the presentation, Glenn. So I was talking to somebody recently about having visited Norway and some of the operations in Norway, where they seem to have, if not resolved, then have the limited the interaction between ocean and hens. And have people from decision makers from the province and the feds, because the province does actually tenure been over to have a look at those operations?
It's a good question. I know of one biologist in the province who's been over to Norway. I don't know of anyone from the federal government who's been to Norway. Ironically, I've toured the Norwegian ambassador from Norway and the Secretary of State for Fisheries here. They've spent more time on Canadian farms than we've spent there. Recently, a number of First Nations, sponsored by MOE, just went to Norway to look at these new innovative technologies. Cyrus Singh from the GNN and a number of GNN members were on that tour. One of the things to know about Norway is they have that, even though the technology started originally in Canada, the industry started in Norway 40 years ago. They now have 1,000 salmon farms. It's a major contributor to their economy. We have 79, but what that means is that all the innovation that is happening in the sector is mostly happening in Norway. And so our challenge is to bring that over and find out whether it will work. One of the things that they have is they have a much better power grid and infrastructure to support some of these new technologies that we don't have.
We're working on the power.
Yeah, no, and that's going to factor very much in what the industry wants to do. So
just something so if, I mean, the grid right now is kind of maxed out between Campbell River and Port Hardy. The lines need to be replaced and a greater capacity. So if there was that greater capacity, significantly greater capacity in power that was delivered to the North Island, would that aid that?
That would aid some of the transitions, yes, because one of the things, for example, is that there are some what are called semi-closed containment technologies. We probably won't work in high energy sites like a lot of the ones here around Port Hardy, but it may allow the sector to go into old sites that were maybe not as exposed and where it's closer to get, the very high-tech version of an extension cord too. And those would allow you to physically separate fish in their first year of a 2-year cycle and break the sea lice cycle for a whole year. So that would be very significant. And the companies are looking very much at doing that. The Clayoquot Sound is having the same issue there's one trial site there. In order to get it electrified, they would have to upgrade the whole transmission line from Port Alberni to Fino.
Being discussed right now.
Yeah.
I mean, up here as well.
Yeah, so we're very excited about those kind of things happening and renewable energy on the North Island.
Well, thank you very much for coming and,
And, Brian,
Thank you.
and Brian, you're welcome to stay.
I haven't had dinner yet, so I'll probably be.
Still full from lunch?
Yeah, that's
Really
because I
can't
didn't,
rope everyone in.
because I didn't have the cake at lunch. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thanks, Brian.
Please
Thank you.
call on us anytime that you have any information requests, and we'll do our very best to keep you guys in the loop as things move forward.
Yeah. Great. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, moving on to business arising. Council action item report, January 10th for information. Any comments, questions? Under Policy and Governance Committee, we have a nomination to ABICC. The recommendation that the Policy and Governance Committee recommends to council that Councillor Jack Gowood be nominated to the Association of Coastal Communities Executive Committee.
I'll make it.
Moved by Councillor Dugas, seconded by
Everyone.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Let us know what we can do.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Mhm.
We'll twist everybody's arm at the ABRC.
We'll be all right.
Yeah.
At our committee, of the whole meeting, we had a presentation on the bequeath of, basically a park out at Beagle Harbor,
From Roger listening.
from the Mr. Lizzie's estate. And, so moving forward, it would be nice to have a motion that, moved by Councillor Robertson, seconded by Councillor Dugas, but what's the motion, Councillor?
Oh, sorry, you didn't read my mind?
No.
Sorry. Move that we move forward with the recommendations from the committee of the whole to investigate, to look at, implement the report to the committee of the whole with the development of the courts at Stories Beach.
Discussion?
Yeah, I have a question. So they presented a budget of 490,000. I'm not aware of the amount of the bequeath.
I see, I don't have that spent.
Is it all covered?
The bequeath is $500,000.
Would all fit within that?
And so just as a comment too, like, there is a $500,000, which is an amazing amount. But it will go in stages. So if the courts are built and that takes up the whole amount, then the add-ons wouldn't be done. They will be reviewing the budget as it goes along.
If you like, I'll just clarify that.
Sure.
So, so the intention is to go ahead with the courts with the, idea that possibly lighting would be included, but they're gonna price out everything and get everything secured for the courts themselves and the fencing, in order to go forward. And then the lights would be kind of an add-on if they were gonna be added on. And then the benches, and then the carving were kind of those last little pieces, just to make sure that they have all of the money for that first part. The other thing is that we've had it clarified that the, project management would be done by, Paul Tupper, so they would be managing everything, except for the archaeological, which the district, because it's our property, we would have to apply for the archaeological, side of things. And then they would basically manage everything and then provide us with an invoice at the end in order to release the funds of the bequeath to the.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. And then rise and report on the Seagate Pier and the recommendation to do the gate. Moved by Council Tidbury, seconded by Council Textall. Any discussion?
Great plan, great idea.
All in favor? Carried. Thank you. And going to our policy and governance committee for resolutions to the 2023 ABICC. This recommendation that the policy and governance committee recommends that council submit a resolution to the 2023 ABICC that calls on the province to review the homeowner protection act regulation, particularly where rural communities provide building inspection to increase the number of owner builders and developers in remote communities. Moved by Councillor Tidbury, seconded by Councillor Smith. Discussion. Councillor Dorwin.
I just wanted to extend my gratitude to whomever reworded this. This is much more favorably worded and more likely to pass than what we
Yeah.
proposed last year.
Yeah, it was tough the other way.
Very happy to vote with this.
Thank you.
I was on the edge, somebody say last year.
Yes, you go.
Any other discussion?
No, it's good, excellent.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Second recommendation that the Policy and Governance Committee recommend the council submit a resolution to the 2023 ABICC that calls on the province for the reestablishment of the Downtown Revitalization Fund for Rural Communities. Moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Dugas. Discussion? All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Evan's got her hand up.
It'll just be on the next item
Okay.
when you're ready.
So we had a presentation at our committee of the whole, and there was,
Sorry.
sorry,
One more.
was there
Sorry.
one more?
Thank you, Mayor, we snuck a third one in, with regards to the vacant properties, and the ability to provide, municipalities with more, power in order to address vacant properties and, an authority to incentivize and compel long-term vacant building to be functionally utilized under the zoning regulation. So this was part of a discussion that we had with staff. So Ross, if Ross wants to jump in, he can, but, he had brought this forward to, the staff and to the mayor as a side. And so we put something together for consideration. Council can choose or not to choose to go forward with that.
I'll do it, just for discussion.
Moved by Councillor Robertson, second by Councillor Tidbury, that we put a resolution in about the long-term vacant properties. Discussion. Councillor.
Yeah, I mean, one of the thoughts that comes up is, well, what if we don't like what they use it for? And, we also have the authority of zone too, so I kind of, yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Any other comments?
Well, I think it's a good idea.
Mhm.
Good. Thank you for putting that together. That's good.
All right, all in favor? Opposed? Carried. At the committee of the whole, we had Dr. Alexander Natoros and Lisa Stewart, do a presentation on physicians. We submitted a letter because they wanted to put it in, they had a deadline for getting their application in. So we have approved this letter in principle, by email, but it's nevertheless, the letter is from council in support of the Canadian Association of Physician Assistants application to the Ministry of Health to approve the use of physician assistants as an alternative healthcare service delivery model to address the ongoing healthcare crisis in rural communities across the province, and that a trial project using physician assistants be implemented in Port Hardy.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Dorwin, seconded by Councillor Smith. Discussion. All in favor? Carried. We also had a presentation by John Horn, Executive Director, Connective, and IMO, Azura Keynes, Case Manager, and Trace McDonald, Case Manager from Rent Bank on January 10th. The request of council, the Rent Bank for discussion. The request was the council contribute $10,000 annually towards loan capital Rent Bank services. Councillor,
Can I move that we refer this to the budgeting process?
seconded by Councillor Smith. Any discussion? Councillor Dorwood?
Well, I think I would also, like, I like the idea of it, but, you know, they asked every community on the North Island, no matter the size, budget, for the same amount of money, and I think we should, like, look at the regional district to maybe coordinate what the total amount would be appropriate for each area, so sort of give a different recommendation on 10,000,
Yes.
just as part of that
Councillor
budget.
Robertson?
Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. I just thought that it would be easier to have that during the budgeting process when we can see what's.
Just like a little
Then
bit,
right now.
a little bit of homework is necessary before it goes to.
Yeah, no, I'm-
budget.
And so I just want to speak up too, because I was surprised that they didn't do a presentation at the regional district. Because they said they were going,
That's what they
they
said.
said they were going to, but they didn't. So I was a little concerned that they're asking 10,000 from every community. Plus, how much are they gonna ask from the regional district? We're already paying into the regional district. So I think whether we discuss it at budget or it needs further discussion.
Yeah.
Councillor-
As a mayor, I'd just like to say that I think it should be brought up at the regional level first. Then we can bring it to them and discuss it as a group, because we're all gonna be there.
Yeah.
And go from there, see what happens.
I agree.
That's, we're gonna do that anyways.
So all in favor to deferring it for the time being? Opposed? Carried. Okay, no new business. Done a lot of
What?
business. Correspondence from Michaela Aruda, Executive Director, Temple River Community Foundation, Community Services Recovery Fund Grant Appropriation. So this, I don't know how many read it, but this is one that I think that we should send out to all our service group. And, that you might know about it already, yes, but other service groups might not know it about it, so. It would be good to, for the nonprofits to see it.
In there?
Yes, sir.
What I found interesting in the letter was that they said that, which you don't usually see, it said that we will be accepting applications for projects with a minimum ask of $10,000.
Yeah,
I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. So they want big asks, not little asks, which is kind of neat.
and projects that are already underway were the 20,000 or something like that.
Oh, yeah,
It was okay, so it's a lot of, it seems pretty broad.
that's
It
good.
does, it's very significant, so. All right, going on to community reports, draft minutes of the Port Hardy Bear Smart Committee meeting held January 11th for information. There's also a recommendation. So did you want to talk about the minutes or just go to the recommendation? This one.
Yeah, I mean, we can go to the recommendation. I guess I could do a little preamble. Thank you so much, Heather, for the perfectly laid out report. So we have our Bear Smart community status, and we sort of brought up that a program like this you don't want to be doing just on the side of your desk. So there's a little bit of funding here to get an actual person that can be in charge of that with a little bit of money. So the budget for Bear Smart is only 5,000, so 4,000 of that would have to go toward this program. So they asked us just to increase it from 5,000 to 2,000. I mean 5,000 to 7,000. And it won't cost taxpayers any extra money, if I remember correctly. So I'm just sort of juggling money around. And yeah, so thank you very much for the report. And Heather, if there's anything I've sort of missed that should be highlighted.
I think, I think it's really important just to note that we were directed, last year when we were talking to the Conservation Service, that we could lose our Bear Smart status at any time if we don't put more dedicated effort and actually change the human behavior. And they were finding that we were not changing the human behavior. We had gone on this streamline where we were doing really, really, really well. And then we had this period of time with about 6 months or so leading up to March where it was really, really, really bad. And so we had about 6 bears that were euthanized, in the beginning part of the year up until about the end of March. And so there was some expressed concern from the Conservation Service that perhaps Fort Hardy may not be able to keep our designated service if we can't continue to maintain that. So they had actually suggested that we apply as soon as that funding is made available, that we apply in order to have somebody dedicated to actually do all of that outreach and to work with the residents. Because really it's about changing that human behavior. And wild bears will still, will still have destruction of bears. And sometimes that's not as a result of the necessary human behavior currently at this point in time. But it definitely doesn't help if you have multiple experiences, right? So especially what we had at the beginning of the year. So in terms of being able to fund this, we had a close look at our community development budget. And it is a budget that is, it is allocated on an annual basis. And that's usually where we support economic development, community branding, the Bear Smart program, as well as some tourism initiatives, et cetera. So if we can shuffle some money from some contracted services in order to support that, that would help us to be able to achieve the goal.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the first recommendation is that the Bear Smart Committee recommend to council that the district submit an application to the Wild Safe BC Community Program and that the Bear Smart budget be increased by 2,000 from 5,000 to 7,000. And the mover, Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Texmo. Discussion? All in favor? And the second recommendation that council applies the Wild Safe BC Community Program for a coordinator to deliver the Wild Safe BC Community Program to support the Bear Smart Fort Hardy program. Councillor Smith and second Councillor Tidbury. Discussion?
Just to point out in there too, that there's some significant training that that person will receive as well. So just an incredible opportunity for that as well.
That's great, thanks. Councillor Dugas?
I just a question, when we're putting in for this, community, the Wild Safe BC Community Program, we are applying for funding to help that program or the education part of it, or is it a combination of both?
There's a combination of both, and then they do all of the training. So
Okay.
the training itself, actually, we had actually looked doing the training as a committee. And the training alone is about $4,000 in order to deliver that. So at least this way, the people would go through the training and then we would be committing basically to their 400 hours of service. And then the Wild Safe BC, in case nobody's aware, but they are governed through the Ministry of Environment. So they're funded directly through the Ministry of Environment and actually provide support services to the Conservation Service. So if you go on their site, the WARP, which is the Wildlife Alert Reporting Program, is actually linked to the Conservation Service. So all of those calls that go in are actually reported by Wild Safe BC on that public portal in order to provide people with information about the
Okay,
traffic.
so we're gonna be putting in $4,000, so what do they put in?
They'll be doing all of the training.
And that's their contribution only
Their
then?
contribution.
Okay, so we're talking $4,000.
We're talking 4,000, so total would be about 8. Because they provide $4,000 worth of training.
Oh, I got you, yeah, right, okay.
Okay, discussion, questions? All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Under staff reports, we have, our Chief Election Officer, Ross Blackwell, has, a staff report. Where'd he go?
Disappeared.
He was just there.
Well, he's gone,
It's just-
yeah, there he is.
There he is.
Oh, he doesn't
You're
speak now.
muted, Ross. Oh, there we go.
Sorry, you were waiting for me? I had to let the dog out to do something, if you know what I mean.
So your report, as the Chief Election Officer?
Oh. Shoot, I didn't even see that on the agenda.
I don't see it either.
We added it.
We
It
added-
was not,
That
you
was
got it.
surprising.
That's the extra sheet we got.
Oh,
Oh, right.
oh, that one, yes. You're referring to the report pertaining to elections BC?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, okay, so that report, sorry, so that report before you reflects an obligation on the part of local governments pursuant to the Local Elections Campaign Financing Act to formally notify in a public forum if a candidate fails to meet the obligations associated with filing a disclosure statement. The report before you indicates such a candidate and sets out the provisions around how that process was handled and will proceed this point forward. I will only add this, that the district also sent an email to the candidate in question, advising them of the approaching deadline. So it was both the district as well as the province that reached out to this individual. So there's no action required. This is merely a report to provide broader notice of the issue.
Thank you. Okay, current bylaws and resolution, bylaw number 1156-2023, user rates and fees for 2023. And we have our CAO is going to help me with the wording on this.
So you have an amendment in front of you. And so what normally would happen is without the amendment, we do a first, second, and third reading. But because there's an amendment to the rates and fees for the schedule that contains the recreation rates, council would do a first reading. And then you would do a second reading with the amendment that includes the recreation rates and fees, if we accept them. And then you could do a third reading after that. So it will be 3 separate motions. So I implore you to do as you wish with the
Thank you, Councilor Kipper.
I'll make a motion that we do the first stage.
Thank you, Councilor Robertson seconded. Discussion, all in favor? Motion for the second reading as amended. Councilor Tidbury, Councilor Smith seconded. Discussion, all in favor? Motion for a third reading. Councilor Smith, Councilor Tidbury. Discussion, all in favor. Thank you, to our CAO. No pending bylaws. Council reports. Councilor Tidbury.
Oh, no, that's good. Just gotta open my phone now. Okay, so, last week I attended the, TLA, which is the Truck Loggers Association. And with my counterpart beside me here, Dennis. And I, again, thought this convention was one of the best conventions I ever go to. It's well organized. It's the knowledge that comes from it is fantastic. They do a bang up job, and here what Dennis can't get on his phone is the program, and it goes down. You can find out who's attending the thing. You can find out where all the events are, and everything is on here. Even the silent auction's on here too. So everything is here. Now the highlights of the show. Well, the Master of Ceremonies was one of the most outstanding people that I've ever met, and that was Vaughn Palmer. From the Sun newspaper. He's been doing, for the last 40 years, he's been doing this. And he's also, there's a radio show on CKNWs. He was very, very good. the outlook I took of it, there was two main areas of that the industry's got concerned with. They got concerned with the supply, and they've also got a real problem with stumpage. They brought up stumpage. It appears BC is not doesn't keep with the times. They're always 6 months behind the stumpage fees, and not very good on their part. They give some other provinces that do different things about stumpage and things like that. We had the premier there speaking, as well as the minister of forest was there. Open discussions. So you can see with these two individuals that the TLA is very well presented to government. We also had the chief forester was there, and he commented on things. One of the things that when sitting around the table, one of the things that was saying, they kept saying, "Where's your secretary?" Secretary was sitting beside me all the time. He wrote tons of notes, just tons and tons of notes. And I was writing them on a little napkin where he had a whole book. So, and maybe when Dennis comes to his turn to talk, he'll talk a little more about it. I also, today, I had the luck of talking to the Ministry of Health regarding Can Connect program. This unit here is the Can Connect, and what it basically is, it's an aid for people that are afraid of computers. As you can see, there's only 3 buttons on this thing, and it's communicating with individuals that don't normally compute. As you get older, some individuals stay in their home and don't communicate. This is a method for communication. This unit here will actually be going to Dennis after tonight, so, and he's gonna pass it on to his mom. And like I say, there was Rosalind, Donna and myself talking with the ministry about this unit. And they thought it was fantastic. Of course, we were asking for more money for the program.
Carry on with the program.
Yeah. But later on, if you want to know a little more about it, I'd be happy to show you the system. But it was good, and the seniors programs are up and going. We had and every Thursday we supply meals to approximately 50 people that come to the center, and it's just going hunky-dory there. That's me.
How many members were there now, they said?
280 some, I believe.
It dropped down a little bit.
Yeah.
Robson was telling me that the numbers are not quite as high as
Yeah,
had thought.
yeah,
Still significant.
Way up there.
Way up there.
yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. Councilor Dugas.
I don't know how you can compete with this. Before I get into the truck loggers, I'd just like to just talk up a little bit about the North Island Seniors Housing Foundation. We've had an opportunity in the last little while to be talking to a number of different individuals. We actually have a developer and a contractor that's basically sat down with us and looked at our project in our particular area that we're looking at. And we're hoping to have more information as far as financing goes before in the next couple of months, so we can be ready to put our application into BC Housing, for their intake, hopefully in the fall. So that's where we're at with that. VINTAS, Vancouver Island North Training and Attraction Society. I've been working a lot with Donna Mary, who happens to be the chair of what we call the Learning Council, which is a committee that's joined with VINTAS now. And there's going to be a meeting coming up next Thursday, February the 2nd, in Port McNeill. And you can do it either online or you can be in person. So we're really interested to have local government and businesses involved as we look at different ways or areas where people see a need for training to increase their learning at their business or where they're at, or to bring new people in. And, but we need to know what their needs are, so we can help them to get the education that we need in the North Island to make that happen. So we're really excited about that. The North Vancouver Island Sustainable Power Coalition. We basically have just finished the final report on the study that was done with regards to the problems with our sustainable power in the North Island. And that's going to be available here pretty quick to be sent out to everybody, so that we can have it sent out to BC Hydro and to our MLA and a number of different people that we want to talk about with regards to moving forward with trying to get better power up here. As Brian had mentioned with his little bit of a talk that he had here tonight about the transition plan for our fish farm industry. We had a meeting there last Friday, and I know that our mayor was at that meeting, and we listened to DFO and the discussions from a number of different people. I think all the way from McChosen all the way up to Bella Bella were online on that particular talk. And obviously I came out of it feeling a little bit better with regards to the fact that they're not totally saying that the fish farms are gonna come out of the water, but they are gonna work along with industry to talk about coming up with different ways and means to be able to minimize or eliminate that contact with the wild salmon or anything in the environment. So it's looking a little bit more promising than what we had thought before in the past, when they said they're gonna be totally out of the water by 2025. Well, that's not necessarily the case. I think one of the big things that came up in that discussion was the timeline is not a reasonable timeline, no matter which way you look at it, with regards to what's going on. If they said they were out of the water by 2025, well, we know that they couldn't go on land by 2025. That's impossible. So it's just to have a sustainable industry, they got to give a reasonable timeline to be able to deal with whatever that transition is. So we're really excited about that. The truck loggers, that was the first time I had the opportunity to go to TLA. It was amazing. It was really amazing. They really put on a really good program. Everybody that was there was all in the same room. They had panelists up there, 3 or 4 people, and they would do their presentations, and then they would open it up to question period. It was excellent. Unfortunately, my book of notes, I left it in my car, so I can't really talk a lot about it. But what I will do is I'm going to go through that, and I'm going to do sort of like an itemized little thing, and I'll write it up and send it to everybody. And then I'm sure Heather can post that as well. But there was a lot of really interesting things there. And one of the things I think that was really interesting there, one of the ladies was talking about with regards to trying to get people back into the industry. And when she was talking about that, she was talking about that we put programs on here in the North Island at WAS, and there's going to be 12 students starting here in March or in April, I guess the beginning of April, in their program to learn about the forestry industry and to be a part of it. But one of the things that she brought up, and I thought, when we thought about it a little bit, we thought, yeah, that's really strange, but COVID has really had a huge impact on our youth. A huge impact. And she was saying that you take that age group from 17 to 20, that would be that there now, or before that, there was 3 years where that group of people, those young people, weren't in the workforce. They were at home. They couldn't go anywhere. They couldn't be with their friends. And she said, think about it. When you were 16 years old and you had a job, you're out there making money to buy a car or whatever. You were in the workforce. You were learning how to work, getting involved and being a part of a team. And you were talking about team sports. They weren't even allowed to be in a team sport. So they lost that for 3 years. And she said, that's that group that's coming up now that have a lot of issues that they're dealing with. You know, first of all, they have to deal with people again. And that's an issue too, that they have to think about. But I thought that was really interesting. And those are the people that are gonna go into that workforce now, that really haven't really even been there, and they've been separated from everything. And that's not gonna be easy for them. And the other thing was, when they were talking about trying to get the young people into the forestry industry, it says, well, we have a big issue up in Port Hardy because they're not working. And so you take the families, and some of the people that I've talked to that have kids, they're telling their kids, I don't know, the forestry industry is the place you want to be, which is really, really sad. Because of what's happening in the logging industry, you know, there's uncertainties, there's so many uncertainties, and we really have to be supportive of it. It's a renewable resource. It's something that can continue and be sustainable. It's just a matter of how it's being managed. And I think that whatever was talked about there, I know that the interest rates are up and the demand's not there, and the markets are really slow and everything else, but it's all a matter about how to manage that forest industry, because it is sustainable and it should be sustainable into the future. I mean, it's a renewable resource. It's always going to be there, and it's important to our economy. It's the number 2 industry in the province. It's number 2 on the list, but it's slowly, unfortunately, sliding down the list. But as far as the conference, it was amazing. And great information. Premier Eby was there. He had a good discussion, but, you know, no promises. He is, you know, politicians. Right? And then we had Honorable Minister Bruce Ralston there, who's the Minister of Forests, Lands, Natural Resources, Operations and Rural Development. It's a big portfolio. Talking about, you know, what they can do to make it better. And we're all interested in how they can make it better, but it's like everything else. It's time, and there's just so many things that are involved. You got the Indigenous relations, you've got a number of other things with the old growth deferrals. You got a lot of things on the plate right now, and then the market. So everything's sort of just come to a halt. But there is a future in forestry, and they're looking for us as local government to work together with our regional district here, Strathcona Regional District, and that was one of the topics down there. Let's all get together and let's be supportive of the industry, because it's so important to our regions, and see what we can do to get our voices heard at the provincial level, right? Because they're the ones that are making the decisions. So thank you, and thank you for the opportunity for me to go to the Truck Loggers Association. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Councilor Robertson.
Yeah, this is gonna be good. And thank you, that was great. I have been wearing my other hat, and a lot of the issues that have been talked about today have been coming across and as part of what the government is paying attention to. So the MLA is paying attention to. And so, yeah, anyway, so that's been occupying a bunch of my time. But other than that, it hasn't been, Nikki presented on the Foundry, so we've heard about the Foundry. I was at that meeting, and there's a Community Futures meeting coming up, and the annual general meeting of the Vancouver Island Regional Library Day is on Saturday. As well.
Councilor Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. January 11th, attended the Bear Smart meeting. You guys have the minutes attached. So plans are underway for Bear Smart Week, and in that we have our teddy bear picnic, and on the 1st we're going to be actually partnering with Port Hardy Recreation, just coming up with some ideas for that. So really excited about that little event to get information about Bear Smart in a fun, active way. Also January 11th, I attended online the Women's Leading Change, the Palin Business innovators. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. It was UVic put it on with the Honorable Janet Austin, and the panel was so great. It was really worth the time. Thoroughly enjoyed that. January 11th had the CCC, so plans have begun for our OCP. We were reviewing that, and we have excellent policy for operations, which I'm so excited about. And then we're just sort of moving forward on all of the rest. So it's looking really good. I was worried it was going to be lean, but we have a very good staff member now on that. So we're very fortunate to have that, and I'm excited to continue and work on that. And yeah, January 23rd, I had our finance committee, so yeah, that's my report.
Thank you. Councilor Texel.
So I got to have my first policy and governments meeting on January 10th, which is a huge learning curve for me, learning how we as a, town council put together resolutions sending to ABICC, and then how they go and lobby at UBCM. Learning how all that works is pretty cool, and how we actually use our voice in a small community, bring it to Vancouver Island, and then it gets brought to provincial government is pretty neat. So it's really cool for me to see all that, learn all that. And then had the first finance meeting yesterday, learning more internals, how things work, which is again, a huge learning curve, seeing how things all work. And it's a lot, but it's good. I really enjoy it. Learning all that. And then I get to have my first actual committee meeting. I'm gonna step in for Trina on the 27th for a VINTAC meeting. So it'll be my first meeting for that. And I'll actually have some for the next council to report on an actual meeting I'm going to. So it's good. No, lots of learning going on. So I'm enjoying it.
Thank you. Councilor Durwood.
Me, of course, the finance committee meeting, and then today at lunch was the Chamber of Commerce meeting up at the Quality Hotel. Food was great, had the salmon, was hoping it was our nice local salmon, but it wasn't. It was wild, could be from anywhere.
Who knows?
Oh, man.
It actually was super good for wild.
The winged salmon.
The farm stuff is just fattier and therefore tastier. It's sort of like Kobe beef, It's just really good.
Just a little point there at the truck loggers, we have clam salmon.
Nice. There's actually a bit of a shortage right now.
Yeah.
As you can imagine from what.
Yeah.
That's right.
So that, it was a lot of the same stuff, but we also heard from,
Cyrusing.
KEDC.
Yeah.
The economic development arm there, and it was important to hear what they had to say about, how they are involved in the aquaculture industry here and how important it is to our nation. So that's good. I was out of the country last week. I went to Arizona, and one of the things I really wanted to do was, there's called the Granite Mountain Hot Shots Memorial Trail, and it's dedicated to 19 wildfire specialized firefighters that died all at once. And when I told Councillor Tidbury about it, he gave me a medallion from the Port Hardy Fire Department, and I was honored to be the one to lay that there. It was very touching. Yeah, so I'm gonna send some of the photos and more information about the trail and stuff to the fire department. So that was pretty neat. I did that sort of work well as well. That is it for me.
Thank you. So just a brief update for me. Went to the regional district meeting. At first, they were worried that there wasn't going to be quorum, but people came in by virtually, so that was good. And had some great presentations there. One by Seven Hills Golf Course and one by Mount Cain Ski Hill. And pretty amazing what they're doing with volunteers and how they're moving forward with different plans and that. So that was really very interesting. Attended a virtual meeting put on by the mayor of Clearwater with the other mayors in the North Island about healthcare and the hospital. And he was involved with the the Alliance of Mayors, but there was a few mayors that were involved in it before, and it's now been re-resurrected. It's been coined by the media as the BC Rural Healthcare Alliance of Mayors, and I just pulled up on who's on it so far, and there's the mayors of the North Island, but there's also the mayor of Metchosin, and there's the mayor of Gibson's, and there's mayors from all over BC, from rural areas, because what's happening in Port Hardy is not unique to the rural area. Unfortunately, I think we're worse than everybody else, but it's not unique. The last few days, and it's funny because our CAO and I were talking not a couple weeks ago, and I said, I need to be doing more. I don't think I'm doing enough right now. And now I go home and lie on the couch and say, don't talk to me right now, because I just feel like I'm being inundated. So, I've done a couple of different interviews with Global. I've done interviews with CBC, Check, Vista Radio, and then today I did an interview with Kamloops radio station, which I thought was rather interesting. But what's happening in Port Hardy and are advocating for doing a pilot project with physician assistants is kind of tweaked other people's interests. And so my sister sent me a clip of, because I won't watch TV now, I won't watch the news. I don't want myself on the news, but she said, I said, so how did I sound? She goes, oh, you sound okay, but they cut you off. And I said, 15 minutes of interview, and they do like this little clip, but and I was telling our CAO today, I had a really nice message from someone quite late last night, and I wasn't going to read it because I thought, oh, it's going to be someone complaining, but it wasn't. It was someone very supportive and just said, next time you do an interview, if you want community members there behind you, let me know and I'll bring in a crowd. And I thought, oh, wow.
Porta crowd.
A Porta crowd, yeah. I just thought, well, that's really nice. So our community knows we're stretched. Our community is so supportive of the healthcare workers we have, but doing what we can to get our voice heard. And that's what the mayor of Clearwater said, because he sent out, I know, like hints. Be as public as possible, talk as much as you can, make sure that you know what's going on. So we, as a council, we did send that letter in support of the being a pilot project for the physician assistants, but just wanted to let people know too, that as a council, we sent a letter the week before to Ministry Dix about needing help. So it's not, we weren't waiting for an ask. Our council is very proactive in doing what they can to lobby for our community. And I went to the open pen engagement, the Chamber of Commerce luncheon. I'm still full. And it's been a busy couple of weeks. So thank you. Sorry.
I just want to say thank you very much for being vocal and speaking out. Obviously, that feedback is probably very true, that our community members will stand behind you and help get our voice heard. We're in a serious crisis, so thank you for doing that, Mayor.
Thank you. It's not an easy thing to do. Yeah, but no.
I'll come yell with you anytime.
But you can't yell. You have to be diplomatic. All right, so information and announcements. We've got a number of different things coming up, and I just want to make sure everybody realizes that our regular council meeting in the middle on the second Tuesday of February has been canceled because we're going down to training on how to be effective councillors and mayors, and we'll come back.
Changed.
Changed. Is anything missing from that notice? Okay. Okay, I think we have no notice of in-camera meeting. The motion to adjourn. Councilor Smith. Thank you. Questions from